Good evening. I have just a couple of quick thoughts I want to share with you this evening. But I want to first encourage you that if you've not obeyed the gospel this evening, tonight is the perfect time to do that. There's some things I want to follow up with to kind of talk about what it means to be a part of God's church. But if you've not experienced that yet thus far in your life, or if you've been a part of the Lord's body for some time and you've just found yourself drifting away, now is a good time to make things right with God. Now is a good time to do what God has called us to do, and that is to confess our faults and then and find our favor with God once again. Some of the thoughts I wanted to share with you this evening have to do with being a part of God's family. And I want to talk about what that means to be a part of the church and the things that come along with being a part of God's family. One of the first places I want to share with you is one of the first thoughts I had on that regard is that the church is a place for healing. And Lane did such a wonderful job in talking about the struggles that we go through, or the places where we find ourselves where we might be hurting or just in a bad spot in life. Well, the church is a place for healing. One of the places that I want for us to look at to see that very clearly is in James chapter 5. And a verse that we're all together too familiar with. But some of the thoughts I want to share with you that come out in that verse is the following. So the church is a place where relationships are built and developed such that we can share our innermost thoughts and concerns. And as we share our joys and sorrows and even our faults, we have support and strength from those around us. In James chapter 5 and verse 16 it says, "Confess your faults one to another, and pray one for another that you may be healed." And in the verses preceding, there's reference to for those who are suffering, for calling for the elders that they might lay hands on them and pray. And in the latter part of those verses in James 5, what we see also is the verses that tell us that, if we find our brother that's in error and we convert that one, the thing that transpires that's greater than any other thing, that is, we save a soul from death and we cover a multitude of sins. And so in the church we find healing. One other thing that we find in the church is health. We look at Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 24 and 25. We read quite often about some words of encouragement there. And in Hebrews chapter 10, in verse 24 and 25, we'll read that in just a second. But what I want to share with you about those verses is this. So in the church, we also have health. A church is a place where we think about one another, where we watch out for one another. We pay attention to one another's spiritual well-being. We look forward to the times when we can be close together so that we can encourage and inspire one another to love and good works. And of course, you know how Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 reads. And it says, "And let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching." One other thing that we have in the Lord's church is it's a place to call home. And I know home brings such good feelings for us when we think about home and going home and what we find at home. And in the Lord's church, we have home. The church is a place where we all feel loved and valued regardless of how we look or how we come from or what our background is. And we have an opportunity to share with one another because we all make mistakes. The church is a place where people think of others before themselves, and it's a place where they are quick to forgive. In the church, the love of God draws us closer as a family into a perfect bond. And so if you're thinking about your place in life this evening and a place that you would like to have to call home, I want you to think seriously about finding that opportunity to obey the gospel and to become a part of God's family and to a place where you can call home. I want to look at Colossians chapter 3 and verses 11 through 15. And there the scriptures say, "Where there's neither Greek nor Jew, circumcised nor uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave nor free, but Christ is all and in all. Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another, and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do." And then in verse 14, "But above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection." And so the church is a place where we can call home. And lastly, the final point I want to make in this talk this evening is that the church is a place where there's hope. And some of the things we've talked about in the beginning is that, how that we all find ourselves struggling through a number of things, and sometimes we are in a place where we might be inclined to lose hope. But the church is a place where there's hope. As we grow in the Lord and feed on His Word, we gain strength and develop a good foundation. And as we build on that foundation and leave the basics, we have assurance of hope because God has promised. And just like Abraham, when he had patiently endured, he obtained the promise. So we look forward to the promises of God. And let's look at Hebrews chapter 5, verse 14. Beginning in verse 14 of Hebrews chapter 5, the scriptures there say, "But solid food belongs to those who are full age, that is, those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil." So therefore, leaving, in chapter 6, beginning verse 1, "Therefore, leaving the discussion of the elementary principles of Christ, let us go on to perfection, not laying again the foundation of repentance from dead works and of faith towards God, and of the doctrine of baptisms, of laying on of hands, of resurrection of the dead, and of eternal judgment. And this we will do if God permits." And then in chapter 6, don't want to read all of these verses, but the verses 1 through 19 help us to understand how we are established in this hope. But in verse 19 is one that I know we've heard quoted a number of times, in where it says, "This hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast." And so as we consider, our stages of life and where we are this evening, I want you to just be reminded that the church, God's family, is a place where there's healing, where there's health, and the place to be called home. And finally, it's a place of hope. And so if that's something that you don't currently have in your life and something you would like to have, I would like for you to come forward this evening, and if there's any way we can help you with that as we stand and sing.